Hey, I'm so glad you're here. You can call me Lilac, and today will be another video response. This one is a bit different in a few ways from the other response I've done so far. Instead of an interview, our selection today is a speech given by Rosaria Butterfield at an assembly of Liberty University students in 2023. Originally, I was sent a 10-minute clip of the presentation, but I found the full 35-minute version, and that's the one I'll reference here. Conservative viewers who find this tiresome, bear with me while I show some compassion for any gay or transgender viewers that may see this. This gets pretty unpleasant. Same-sex attraction is outright called evil. She also carefully makes sure to misgender and eventually dead-name an old friend of hers. I will try my best not to assume malice, as she presents a conviction that she's doing the right thing. But as someone who lived in this culture during my formative years, it was difficult to listen to her trample this woman's identity, when, according to her, once upon a time, she knew better. If you are still in the early stages of dealing with that, this may be rough, so proceed carefully. Rosaria has fully adopted the beliefs of her new social circle. She calls being gay and trans evil without euphemism. She gives no quarter to her former allies. It is clear why she's held up as an outspoken personality for this brand of Christianity. Rosaria switched sides. Honest or not, she's an example of someone who defected to the correct side.
I was a tenured associate professor of English and women's studies at Syracuse University. I had been in and out of serially monogamous lesbian relationships for a decade. My most popular classes at Syracuse were in feminist queer theory. I co-authored the university's domestic partnership policy, which served as a model for future gay marriage activism, and advocated for LGBTQ rights. And I proudly became one of the tenured radicals who worked laboriously to make homosexuality look wholesome.
Why is she saying all this? You need to know that she was all in. She did terrible, evil things. She was in a committed relationship, taught a class with a scary-sounding name, and worked as an advocate for a group of people she identified with? Look, whether or not you think any of those things is objectionable, she was living her life. This is from another video 11 years ago where she is recounting her testimony with other details.
I had a normal childhood, whatever that means. My parents raised me in the Catholic faith, and I attended predominantly Catholic schools. My liberal Catholic all-girl high school discipled me in the life skills that I use today.
Rosaria was raised Roman Catholic, even going through Catholic school all the way up until college. Part of her testimony seems to center around Christianity being foreign to her, but she spent her formative years immersed in it. I was raised to listen carefully to what someone is actually saying and be mindful when it seemed to be targeting my emotions. Rosaria Butterfield is a prolific speaker and has written more than a few books. Her testimony is practiced and streamlined to her audience. That doesn't mean she's being dishonest either, but if you're immersed in the culture that says queerness is evil, this song was written with you and your anxieties in mind.
Dear Liberty students, I helped make some of the evil of the world in which we live.
If I may be glib for a moment, Professor Butterfield, at worst, you participated in it. Gays, lesbians, and us delightful trans people existed before your work, and we have carried on after. I didn't even know who you were until I started working on this video. I hope that eases your conscience somewhat. After that groundwork is laid, she describes how she came to find herself in a relationship with another woman. Even while dating men, she felt attracted to women. Her friends were pushing her in that direction, knowing that she had corresponding feelings of attraction.
I didn't see myself as a lesbian until long after the time that all of my friends did. In my early 20s, I even dated men. And often as I was publicly dating men, I was privately falling in love with women. And my lesbian friends just told me that my coming out was only a matter of time. And so when I entered my first lesbian relationship at 28, I believed that I had found my authentic self.
I have a hard time believing that a professor of feminist queer theory would be unaware that some people are attracted to both men and women. I've actually read a fair amount of material available online by Rosaria and about her, and none of it elaborates on this point. Unless she talks about it somewhere I overlooked, I have a feeling it's because there's no interest. But if so, that kinda lends itself to the point that this account is tailored to its audience. The idea is to set off all the fire alarms for a conservative listener. Again, she may see it this way herself, but there's a lot of emotion woven into this message. She was pushed into being a lesbian and away from straight relationships. She then took up their cause and did a bunch of damage. Then Rosaria met a Christian couple that got her to read the Bible. She talks about it like she had never opened one before. I mentioned earlier that Rosaria has authored books around her testimony. This is from her book called The Gospel Comes with a House Key. Going to dinner at the home of Christians was not high on my list of longed-for activities. As an out lesbian feminist, a leader in the LGBTQ rights, the recent co-author of the first domestic partnership policy at Syracuse University, and soon to be tenured radical, my heart's desire was not to become friends with the enemy. Christians seemed like a small-minded, uncharitable, immoral bunch. They ate meat, believed in corporal punishment, violated human and environmental rights at a fevered pitch, denied a woman's right to choose, and believed the whole world should fall under the totalitarian obedience to the Bible, an ancient book fraught with racism, sexism, and homophobia. They believed in and manufactured superstitions about sin, which I believed was, as Freud declared, simply a cultural phenomenon deeply held by dupes whose thinking was manipulated by a universal obsessional neurosis. But mostly, Christians just scared me to death. I've heard descriptions like this before in Christian books and live performances. When you're raised in the culture, it's noticeable, and there are common themes that reoccur. The author or speaker belabors how far away they were from godliness and how contemptuous they used to be of Christians. Again, even if this narrative is completely accurate factually from her point of view, it is stated in such harsh terms to align with tradition. I can't imagine this view of Christians was formulated in real time the way it's presented. On top of that, though, this is such a toxic way to think about a group of people. If this is what you're afraid of when you sit down and consider who someone is based on their affiliation or identity, then you have made up an imaginary threat. There are unsafe people in the world, but you cannot identify them by their appearance or their religion. By her own words, Rosaria was in a place of resentment, even fear, toward Christians, apparently thinking them incapable of decency. She is describing a fear that it is also common for Christians to have of not just non-Christians, but even Christians with sufficiently different doctrine. It is a very human fear. We are wired to feel safest with people who share a history or identity. We are also wired to fear those who we are told to fear by people we trust, rightly or wrongly. The thought process described in her book and echoed in her speaking appearances was in reaction to a letter she received from a local pastor about an apparently fiery article she had written. It was about a Christian group visiting her college when she was a professor.
The article generated many rejoinders, so many that I kept a Xerox box on each side of my desk, one for hate mail and one for fan mail. One letter that I received defied my filing system. It was from Ken Smith, the pastor of the Syracuse Reformed Presbyterian Church. It was a kind and inquiring letter, Ken didn't argue with my article. Rather, he asked me to defend the presuppositions that undergirded it.
Despite feeling so threatened, she went to share a meal with them, and they treated her with kindness. That was something that struck me when I started interacting with those considered queer. Throughout my life to that point, queer people were perverse and disgusting when they were doing things that made them happy. But they were also always waiting for the next opportunity to be offended. Because under the surface, they were all secretly miserable, I guess? I should have known better sooner. But gay people are not just gay. Just like Christians aren't just any one particular way. Our minds seek patterns, though. And they prioritize keeping us safe from perceived threats. And they really want to label those threats by traits that can be quickly assessed. So our brains only come with a broad brush. We have to learn how to paint in smaller lines as we realize other people are indeed full, complicated beings like ourselves. And that doesn't happen automatically as we get older.
Slowly and over time, the Bible started to take on a life and a meaning that really startled me. But each time I warmed a little bit to the Bible, the doctrine of sin sent me scrambling.
Rosaria was raised Roman Catholic. She went to Catholic school. I would be very surprised if the seeds of shame and a non-conforming sexuality weren't sown during that time. I speak from experience that just being raised in that environment teaches a fear for those who don't understand and deep shame for those who might. We find out that Rosaria had a friend named Jill. I will say the next few clips may be distressing to someone raised in this culture who is early in their self-acceptance journey. If you think that's a good thing, why? I can tell you I was very confident in my identity from very early on. But when I heard things like this speech, the language of condemnation, I was reminded that some of the people I cared about and most wanted to share my newfound enthusiasm for life, my family, thought I was deceived and delusional. I know my biological reality. I've always been really inquisitive and valued knowledge and truth. I understand how my body works, probably more thoroughly than many people who lack medical training. I am not bothered when I hear these things now, but I do feel empathy for her friend.
Friends knew that I was reading the Bible, and at a dinner gathering that my partner and I were hosting, my transgendered friend, a biological man who lived as a woman and went by the name Jill, cornered me in the kitchen. One night, he put a large hand over mine in the kitchen and said, "Rosaria, this Bible reading is changing you." And that's when I learned my transgendered friend's backstory. "Rosaria," he said, "I was a Presbyterian minister for 15 years with a wife and kids. I prayed that God would heal me, but he didn't. If you want, I will pray for you." The next day when I returned home from work, I found 2 large milk crates spilling over with theological books. My friend's seminary library. I opened the book on the top of the pile, and in my friend's handwriting, I learned something amazing. Jill's real name. And a stark image snuck into my consciousness before I could do anything about it. Maybe maybe Jill is a sham. I mean, this is Matthew. And somewhere out there, Matthew has a deserted wife and abandoned kids. That image started to burn a hole in my dearly held belief that living an LGBTQ plus life hurts no one.
She calls her transgender friend's identity a scam. That is awful. Why does she treat the discovery of her friend's birth name as if she had cracked some kind of criminal case? She said her friend had left those books for her. It sounds like the name was written on the first page of the first book she opened. Jill wasn't hiding her former name. It's actually sad to think that maybe Jill wasn't hiding her former name because she thought Rosaria respected her identity. A transgender person, when they transition, has to rebuild themselves. All their life up to that point, they often must pretend to have certain traits, put up fronts, not deception for deception's sake, but as an act of protection from a world that is not kind when you are not normal. Jill's old identity wasn't a scam either. She was probably doing the best she could with the framework she was raised in until it just wasn't working for her anymore. I can only guess that she was raised to believe that it was her life's goal to have a wife and children, so she went out and did that. Some marriages don't survive the discussion of gender, much less transition, and I would imagine the social pressure of being a minister did not help the situation. But many do survive, and many of those thrive when the weight of hiding and suppressing is lifted. There is usually so much self-reflection that happens when we decide to move forward with transitioning. To my knowledge, we don't know what Jill has to say about this, because she's never made any public statement or even been identified. Even the part of me that wishes we could hear her perspective is relieved at that. I can't imagine the danger it would put her in to come forward. Earlier, we were treated to Rosaria's view of Christians when she didn't consider herself one. Now we are told how she came to view the queer community, as she was about to reject it.
So I opened my Bible and faced one of the passages that I had been dodging. Romans 1, starting with verse 21. This passage finds its crescendo in how one sin, homosexuality, morphs into others. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice, full of envy, malice, murder, strife, deceit. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. My gay friends believed that we were all sexual minorities, a people group in need of political protection from a hostile world because of our never-changing sexual orientation.
No, that isn't my understanding of why that people group need protection from a hostile world. Gay and transgender people don't need protection because of our unchanging anything. Allies of the queer community come to our defense because there's a very vocal segment of the population that quote Bible verses to link the idea that being gay or transgender gives us over to urges that make us want to hurt people. Bible verses are used as a backdrop to tell people that we are dangerous and should be feared, pitied, or hated. Tellingly, which of those it ends up being seems to depend on the innate compassion of the person and their relationship to the person in the closet.
And transgenderism and homosexuality come from the world, the flesh, and the devil, not God's created order. My homosexuality was at enmity with God.
You may not understand how or why I am this way, but I know my own thoughts. You can dismiss or explain away my feelings. It's really easy to do, and you don't even have to engage with me or find out anything about any of this. This is scary because we were taught it's dangerous. It's just not. I am a danger to no one. We aren't done, though. The stone tablets of the Ten Commandments are being lifted up to be brought down on our heads, too.
What does the Bible record is the sin of homosexuality and transgenderism, if not physically acted upon? Well, that sin is the violation of the 10th commandment. You are not to covet your neighbor's wife or his sexual anatomy. And desiring someone or something that God prohibits, even before you act sexually or medically upon that desire, is the sin of covetousness.
Okay, side note. The 10th commandment is from Exodus 20:15. This is what it says. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. The 10th commandment is about property. It does not say anything about your neighbor's body. Ugh. This would have made me uncomfortable even when I believed she was right about queer people.
The Bible makes clear that fallen flesh and a redeemed mind have a troubled relationship on this side of eternity. For many people in the Bible, their redeemed identity and calling comes only after a long struggle with God, with wilderness, with dreams and hopes and plans dashed and destroyed.
Any life lived will have some or all of those things. Identities are forged this way for everyone. Have you not experienced struggle or hardship? Has anyone ever?
As an advocate for peace and social justice, I thought I was the one on the side of kindness, integrity, care, and diversity. It was thus a crushing revelation to discover it. It was Jesus I had been persecuting the whole time.
If Rosaria was on the side of kindness, integrity, care, and diversity, how was she persecuting Jesus? She never tells us the harm those things were doing. What about kindness is persecution? What about integrity, care, or diversity is harmful? And that is all fine. Rosaria can characterize her process any way she feels is true to her journey. Her journey was out of the queer community and into a rigidly conservative Christian ideology. Mine was not. My journey started in a similar environment that hosts Rosaria's worldview within it. I believed in all of it as well. It was so important to me to acquire an understanding of the world I inhabited to make real the words on the pages of Scripture. I rejected the ideas of the world and wanted to discover the truth. So I left room for the idea that I didn't have it all figured out. Because of that, I set down my old beliefs when they didn't bear out after careful examination and prayer.
I started to think of my lesbianism as a false identity and my life as a lesbian as a season, albeit a long season, of sinful confusion.
If you think that I'm dishonest or deceived, this video won't satisfy you. It never could. No one is convinced by a single speech or one line of argument. The goal of my life's journey has been to be the greatest blessing I can be to the people around me, both before transitioning and after. Your belief in my sincerity is yours alone. All I can do is offer it. You are absolutely free to believe every word of Rosaria's testimony and find mine to be unconvincing. I would hope that you examine why that may be, especially if you believe the same things she does. But do it or don't, because that's a step on your life's journey. It has been a while since the last episode was released, and a lot has been going on that pulled my attention away from this project and channel. I will be making a short companion video to follow this one that touches a little bit on my process and what my plans are for this space. With this latest entry, I am trying to commit to a return and much more frequent content. My heart is really in pushing back against the lies and ugliness directed, let's be honest, in just about every direction to distract and exhaust anyone trying to keep track of it all. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll be back soon. Go ahead and leave a comment if you have something to say, but please do it with courtesy. I hope you have wonderful days ahead. Bye!